Hey, Axiom's here. What's up, Axiom?
About time, right?
Woo! Oh
Hang on,
my,
I'm
He made it.
so exciting to see you.
fiddling with my. I found out very beautifully. Hello to everyone who's joining on TikTok. That I actually don't have permission to desktop stream, which is great. But I'm gonna go live on Twitch, so that should help.
I think you have
Mhm.
to do it like a certain number of times on your phone before
Yeah,
you.
two times and at least 25 minutes each is what it was telling me. So
Yeah.
I am using a phone. Like, I am literally using a phone and pointing it at the screen because that's how difficult it is to stream to TikTok.
I know I thought it'd be
Oh,
easier. Like
yeah, me
Do
a
you
bunch of us work in tech. You'd think it would be simple, but it's not. It's not.
hard. It's a
do
whole
you,
job, y'all. It is a,
do you
I have
remember
a
when
lot of
we
respect now.
do you remember when we did that in person one and you pulled out this thing and it like and I was like I like jumped, but now I have one and it's like so great.
The best. I love them.
That was my backup option.
Yeah, yeah.
Are you
Uh,
guys? I know you guys are all techies, so I imagine you're mostly on PCs.
Yeah.
mm,
Yep.
no.
Well, I guess depends. So
You're
didn't
on
you say you're
Mac?
running a VM, right, Liz?
Yeah, I run Windows on a VM, but like I'm not using it. I'm literally I'm on a Mac. I mean, it's easier to do code stuff on a Mac because it's Unix-like, and so yeah.
I have both, but this is Windows.
No, it's just the TikTok thing. If you're not doing it on a PC, you can't
Yeah.
even download the studio to be able to
Right.
get your key and
I
stuff.
found that out about
Yeah,
an hour ago.
dude, it's so annoying.
Oh
Yeah.
no, I didn't. Yeah.
I feel like you kind of need both. All the tools are so janky.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, 100%.
You do.
Well, regardless, anyone that's watching, thank you for being here.
Yeah.
I know.
Saturday morning, cybersecurity cartoons, as CJ said earlier. It's great.
Not letting me go live either on my Streamlabs. Isn't that awesome?
Yeah, yeah. I literally set up a phone in front of my computer for these reasons. I don't know. TikTok lives is fine. It's just like they don't prioritize the creator experience, which is weird because they do so well with their editor. So I don't know.
Look at that.
Must
I
be.
For
just
real.
I just got the YouTube recruiters reaching out to me to join and like do stuff there. And they're like, one of the perks is you get like a person that's like there to help you with whatever is going on. And I'm like, oh my God, what must that be like? TikTok doesn't even care if you submit a support ticket.
Like refer me for TikTok or YouTube's thing because like I don't know I post everything goes straight to YouTube like at the same time as it goes to Instagram I go viral. YouTube I get capped at 100 or 1K. It just like
Mm.
they just like hit a ceiling and they don't ever go above like 1K.
Because Peter hates you.
It's probably because of that. I mean, it's one of the few billionaires I haven't been in the room with that, like to specifically anger. So,
All right. Well, I got it working on Twitch. Audio's working through there. And everyone who's popping in on TikTok, they're looking at my face, but I'm
yeah,
sure we'll figure it out as we go through in time
yeah,
as we keep doing these, because ideally this isn't the only one we do. And I get a feeling we won't cover everything that we want to talk about in just this discussion. So
yeah,
Yeah.
um yeah, I mean, I guess we should start with like I did a lot of research on this because a lot of my concerns first, I guess we should qualify what was the progenitor of this discussion, right? We're all fairly left leaning, and I think that there's a lot of conversation around AI in particular about its utilization to us as people in that spectrum of leftism, as
mhm,
well as some I would feel are valid concerns, some that we may feel are misconceptions, but we were having a discussion informally, and then we thought this would be a good idea to just do live because I'm sure I'm not the only one who have these questions, as well as James, you had some questions as well. So I guess maybe we start with introductions. We say
Yeah.
hello
yeah.
to each other and say who we
I think
are.
so. How people normally do these things.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
I guess Liz, you want to start?
Sure. And Liz, Future Infinitive on the platforms or Liz the developer. Uh, been in the field for 25 years. I started 9 companies, and most of them were schools, and I taught 2 million people to code, and most of them were immigrants. So yeah, let's fix things. Like I'm angry because I know those people personally, and I want to help them. So that's why I get on the internet, and I'm like, these are very real people to me, because I remember
Mm.
like shepherding them into their career, and I'm like, no, my babies. So that's what
CJ, you want to go next?
Hi, I'm CJ. I don't know. I do a lot of weird shit, and hopefully you like it.
And you will never,
Perfect.
and you're not going to know anymore. And I'm not going to tell you.
I mean, it's
James?
everything from like doing like radical real estate to like doing like AI and like these distributed comms networks, and doing like a lot of fundraising, and doing land projects and community gardens and TV show and a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Jeez, I didn't know about the TV show.
I
That's
didn't know
crazy.
about the TV show either. That's interesting.
I'm on HBO and Discovery.
Nice.
Wow. Okay,
Cool,
Daddy.
actually.
Shit. Um, yeah, so my name is James. I am the resident layman here as far as the technicalities go, but have a strong knowledge of uh, sociological theory, Marxist theory, and I think I just kind of offer like a dumb guy take on a lot of this.
A not
Oh, I think
big.
you're underselling yourself, man. We need a layman with tech, but I wouldn't say you're a layman with theory, right? Like,
No, that's yeah. I'm a mediocre theory guy. So yeah.
I guess I'll go too. Yeah, my name's Axiom. I've been in cybersecurity for about cybersecurity and tech for at least like a decade now. I've had a strong background in political organizing as well, with family and friends, deeply entrenched in a lot of that behavior, as well as organizing and activism outside of just what my 9 to 5 is. So I would say I'm decently read on, intersectional theory, critical race theory, a lot of leftist theory, as well as tech in general, in what my job incorporates, which is a lot around the ethics and the efficacy of technology and how it's implemented, with a background of software development as well as now focus in cybersecurity. So um, I guess, I guess kicking off this discussion, to me, I took a lot of notes on this because I wanted to make sure I came in with concerns that weren't just completely unsubstantiated. And Liz, I know you collected a variety of
Oh yeah.
questions and complaints from your audience. Same with me, and also people who are looking at our lives. Please feel free to add comments
Oh, yeah.
there. But I think it's good for us to divide the concept or definition of AI at least in 3 broad categories, and feel free to tell me if these are too broad or ones that wouldn't fit. But I was thinking we talk about what AI as an industry is, AI as in generative AI exclusively, and then AI as an AI assistance as in a tool measure.
Mhm.
I feel like that's a good way to sort of differentiate where some of the concerns we all agree on, where discourse may exist. And I think part of this, I guess, my intent with this conversation is to empower us as people to either clear up misconceptions about AI, qualify our concerns with legitimate data, and understand it not as this boogeyman that we have to constantly see as a problem, but to empower us. Because I think even if we consider it an enemy, being unaware of it and uneducated on it allows it opportunity. That's a risk to me, as I would
Yeah.
consider it in my field. And that's what this discussion is primarily about, is
Yeah.
how it is a risk or where it might not be. I guess let's start with the elephant in the room then. The big one. AI as an industry, I guess, would be the conversation here. Climate impact, right?
Mm,
There's a lot of conversations about that. So I say we just start with the biggest one immediately, if that's okay with you
nice.
guys.
5 votes. Yeah, that's what my audience was like. The climate impact, mostly that, right?
Okay. Yeah. Who wants to start?
I
I
have
mean,
some numbers. If
yeah, you got numbers right
Go
on.
ahead.
Do it.
so, like one thing that people talk a lot about is water consumption,
Mhm.
which is not something that AI does. AI is not consuming water. When they talk about that, what they're talking about is the embodied cost of power production. So when we generate power using natural gas, that consumes water.
Right.
And so people talk, there are a lot of these like really, really egregiously exaggerated claims about like it takes 100 gallons of water to answer a question or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
And we've all seen that. The reality is, um, in the Colorado River Basin, for example, 90% of the water goes to industry. Less than 10% of the water makes it to cities and towns and people. And
Mhm.
like 2% is watering lawns, right? So like these things that we're told to focus on is like our personal interaction with products that leads to these embodied outcomes is always irrelevant. And it's
Yeah.
designed to make us feel guilty for using things like like growing tomatoes in the backyard. We're wasting water doing that when we could be buying them at the store, and some capitalist is profiting instead, right? And it's this
Right.
story of like personal, this myth that like if we all just buy Priuses, then climate change is solved and we don't have to change anything, even though the like 90% of the problem is coming from corporations selling us things like Priuses. And so in the
Yeah.
example of AI, all of the power that's being used by all AI in the US is equal to the amount of water that's consumed to produce 347 acres of alfalfa. And we're
Mhm.
growing 22 million acres of alfalfa. And we're doing all of it by diverting the Colorado River to flood deserts, which is just wasted because it's not even a useful crop. We just
Right.
export it to be fed to horses in Saudi Arabia.
Right.
And states are trying to change that. But it's a question where it's like this is tens of millions of times more than that. And nobody's talking about this. Like people are very concerned with like some tiny amount of water being used to produce power unsustainably,
Mm-hmm.
which has nothing to do with the problem of
Of
power
AI.
being exactly. And so when you look at the Chinese example, the training, the inference, running prompts is all happening with nuclear power, and nuclear power is the safest, cleanest, most reliable, most affordable source of power that humanity has ever created. And so like if you look at the Chinese example, like what they're doing is much more sustainable because they're using less water intensive power production. And that's really the problem. The problem, it has nothing to do with AI. It's just the way that they're talking about the way the power grid works in America, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Um, it
Yes.
has nothing to do with AI. But
So clear me up on this, because a lot of the reading that I was doing. So first, we should differentiate the difference between water use and water consumption, right?
Mm-hmm.
The EPA defines water use as something that is like not consumed. I keep dancing around consume. It has a process of being used, and then it returns to its original water source, right? Consumption is evaporation or removal of that water through either its usage or the water cycle occurring away from its natural source, right? So
Evaporation
it,
counts as one of those. Like if you
yeah,
evaporate it, it could go, it'll go as rain somewhere. It's not like gone, but it's like maybe it will be somewhere else on the planet or
sure.
something.
Like evaporation in the data center versus evaporation outside by the primary source. That would evaporation would be water use. Evaporation in the data center would be water consumption.
Mhm.
Um, so you guys are saying that the water that's consumed, the claims aren't legitimate, or it doesn't use as much water? Like, because I do have some numbers and stats I want to talk about, and I'm surprised to hear that this is the claim being made, I guess.
So, if I could jump in, a lot of the sources are, I think, one of the big problems.
Mhm.
About every week, there's a new article that comes out, and it's like March 9th, 2025, AI still eating all the water. But um, then it references a study that was done either in 2018,
Mhm.
2020, or 2022, all of which are vastly out of date. AI has gotten 100 to 1,000, depending on which study you're referencing, 100 to 1,000 times more efficient in the last 3 years. And so there's a lot of articles. People will find a study and they will go, see, I found a study. Studies are authoritative. And so there's a study that says it's bad. And I'm like, okay, but I found a newer study that says it's good. Also, the comparison is, I think, the biggest issue. Like, if you did want to take the personal responsibility route, you could just not eat one hamburger one time in a year. You could just go, I'm gonna skip it once. And then that's all your AI water use for a year, right? And so most of the time, these the sources that I'm finding, you know, I'm gonna reject anything from 2022, 2020. And if the original source from the article is one of those studies, that's the thing. Like I did a whole bunch of research, and I even got like ChatGPT and Claude to do a bunch of this research, because that's some people are just like, they're gonna ask and they're go, well, is it? And here's the thing, Claude and ChatGPT, I'll say, don't bring me anything from 2022, and they'll bring me recent articles that then reference the 2022 study. So just, you know, if you do have numbers, I'm happy to take a look at those, but make sure that they're from like recently, and
Yeah,
distinguish
Y-
between there are
I
bad power plants and
The other
I
piece that
actually in
gets left
advance.
out,
Oh, good.
the other piece that gets left out of this part of the conversation is the fact that when you look at uh like budgets, right? When you look at all the companies that are spending the money on doing all of this inference, for example, inference is operational expenditure, and the cost of inference as OpEx is the cost of power, and the power is the source of the water use. And so if you're talking about like it's a non-problem because every single player has every incentive to minimize that specific kind of consumption or they will go bankrupt.
right.
So this is a system where like the incentives that are built into the the business cycle around this issue are all aligned with climate goals, where like if you like if they don't minimize to the maximum possible degree those outcomes, they will go out of business. And that specifically is what they're all competing on, is minimizing those kinds of costs, which are trivial compared to one cheeseburger, right? So like it's like focusing attention on these tiny details instead of seeing the big picture of like where is the water actually going, right? And that's, I think, it's always a waste of everyone's time and attention when people bring up this concern, particularly given where this technology came from and why it was invented, which was to model ecological systems, to the idea of
Literally.
being able to predict these kinds of complex structures and how flows of resources like water flow through ecosystems. This is the reason that the Soviet Union invented artificial intelligence, was to understand these kinds of things and to see that bigger picture and not get stuck on these tiny details that are at 0.01% of the total consumption, where it's like one cheeseburger outweighs all AI, you know?
Well, I don't want
Well,
to. I don't want to. Oh, go ahead, James.
no, it's all good. Keep going.
I was just gonna say I don't want to, downplay the concept that there are material impacts, right? Like we're talking about the comparison of a cheeseburger gets brought up in terms of water usage and carbon footprint. We could talk about the efficacy of how much a cheeseburger applies materially to people's lives versus like an AI prompt, right? But I included links to all the sources that I want to reference at the bottom of the document that we were using today for complaints. But in particular, one of the things that I was reading about is I actually have some friends that live in Iowa as well. But so I used Iowa as an example. There's discussion in the study that 8% of Iowa's water consumption is from data centers, 34 of them to be exact. And right now, Iowa's in a drought, which means that their wells, the majority of them, are operating at 20% their original capacity. So if we were to take this number at face value of 8% of consumption of water in that state is caused by the 34 data centers, and they're at 20% capacity, that's a much more significant impact to the accessibility of water, right? So even if we're talking about its overall consumption and whether it does use it currently or it's reducing over time, what we're talking about is its current availability. And there are concerns across a wide swath of discussions of people saying, hey, we're in a drought. What is this benefiting us, right? Back to the conversation of a cheeseburger and an AI prompt. A cheeseburger will feed a person for that time, right? You could argue it has a material impact. What is an AI doing that's providing, say, let's take the people of Iowa, for example, for the amount of water that's being used? Do you guys believe it's still more beneficial in the way it's using water?
Yes, but let's dig in.
Yeah.
So short answer, yes. Long answer. Okay, so AI is largely used for efficiency gains. That is what machine learning was developed for, right? To find the optimum set of input variables that will produce the lowest amount of resource usage, right? This is called gradient descent, right? And so machine learning is under the bucket of AI. That's why it was developed, and it's the majority of AI data center use up into like the last, I think, year, maybe year and a half. But like that's what people build and train mostly is these big models to do stuff like climate prediction. And those things do save a lot of energy, right? Um, the other thing that is happening is that structural exploitation exists. Even if you, through a magic genie, just we get one wish and somebody is like, it's AI, delete AI forever, and no one ever does AI ever again. Those data centers would still exist. The people who own them would still make the choices that they are currently making, right? They would then be incentivized to come up with a narrative for why you still need the data centers, right? And that's sort of the thing about a lot of this is like there's no counterfactual. There's no like what's the other side? What's the then if we just and the answer is sort of frayed or impossible or like oversimplified to the point of being useless, right? A magic genie makes AI go away. The other thing is the day-to-day use for individuals. Like I work on that a lot. I work with people who are not technical sometimes about AI, right? Um, it does save a lot of people a lot of time. It does recipes, it does planning. Let me tell you, as a mom, you have no cognitive bandwidth. As a teacher, you have no cognitive bandwidth. Me being able to do something like speak my lesson plans out loud and have an AI just format them in bullet points and put bold in the right place saves me hours every single week that I then get to spend with students one-on-one. So there's like a lot of sort of long tail, small amounts of things where you could put some mental energy there, but you only have so much time in the day. You
Yeah.
only have so much mental energy. And in most cases, people have to pay the ADHD consumer tax, right? Instead of having a big tub of yogurt with one plastic container, you have 20 Go-Gurts so that you don't have to think, right? And that's more plastic in the environment, and it's not as good quality yogurt and all kinds of stuff. It's just to save you a bunch of like mental bandwidth, right? So we a lot of times will accept environmental load costs in order to save ourselves mental bandwidth, like as a society at large. And while an individual can super optimize, you're super optimizing in one area, and that means that you're leaving some attention open somewhere else where you're offloading, and you don't realize that you're offloading because nobody is an island, right? But when we use AI, and I'm just talking about like the things that I've seen my students do, um, you know, uh, a lot of times the saved mental load for regular normal people exceeds any amount of water usage. The other thing is you compare like an AI or a cheeseburger's material, it feeds a person and that feels more, it feels more human than using AI to just what, make a bunch of dumb pictures? No, like to plan the meal plan for your super delicate autistic kid with their autism tummy and they like weird, food needs and stuff like that. Like it's not always just somebody being like, show me the largest hot dog that's ever been created, a hot dog as big as Earth. Like it's not always that. It's a lot of times something that is like meaningfully useful to an individual, right? Um, and so I mean, a lot of these equivalencies are broad
Mhm.
brushes that don't bear out in the individual case.
But it's also a good structural criticism. Cheeseburger is a good structural criticism of other problems in the same way that like alfalfa is a better criticism of water use than AI. Cheeseburger, um,
Yeah.
83% of Americans lived on farms at the beginning of World War II, and
Yeah.
they lived primarily on plant diets. And it uses like 100,000 times more water to supply the same nutrients via a cheeseburger versus more sustainable plant-based alternatives that you can grow in your backyard. which is how most people ate until industrial agriculture took over after World War II and told everyone you need to eat meat every day and every meal, in fact, which was not normal anywhere in the world before that.
Really?
And there are all kinds of terrible side effects of eating meat as frequently as Americans tend to. So it's a good structural criticism because meat uses so much water compared to more nutritious foods that are healthier for people to eat, that are more normal for people to eat historically.
Right.
So
I
it's
think
kind
that there is something to be said because I mean we're very much focused on the water usage, which I know is kind of like the standard criticism of the environmental impact of artificial intelligence. And I think that I mean you guys are
Yeah,
obviously
yeah,
speaking to like larger socioeconomic realities, like
definitely.
institutions of property and decision making, and how you can extrapolate from the AI thing into its own world and to other worlds. And I think that's obviously a important thing to do. But environment is more than water. You know, like the recent Grok AI thing in Memphis that is emitting, you know, they like brought in like 35 methane like gas turbines.
Yeah, yeah.
And now a bunch of
Not
people in that immediate one sec.
That's
Um
Elon Musk
no,
being,
no, no, but no, no,
you know,
that's fine that it's Elon Musk, but I'm just saying there are other environmental impacts. And my point here is not to say don't use AI. That's not my point at all. My point is about democracy. My point is about decision making.
yes.
And the thing is that the people that are impacted by these things aren't the ones making the decisions around them. Whether or not the people in Memphis fuck with Grok or you know,
Yeah.
ChatGPT or you know,
Yeah.
OpenAI or whatever, they wouldn't be the one making the decision. And if they were able to make the decision, they'd say, I don't want this shit here.
Yeah.
Not saying they don't want this shit, they don't want it here. Yes, and it would be so great, CJ, if we were like China and we just created a new thorium reactor that had salt cooling where there is no water usage to cool a nuclear
Mhm.
reactor. Like incredible. That'd be so sick. Love it. But there's also, I think, the reality of talking about that we do exist in the particular political and social context that we do. And so to I think sometimes whisk it away a little bit just because like, oh well, there's another way. It's like for sure. But there is the thing that's happening right now. So the thing in Iowa with the water usage, the thing that like the pull on the power grid from the usage of AI and these you know factories, basically like supercomputer factories, whatever, is drawing ever more energy from the grid, whether or not the
It's just not.
per
It's not
It's
though.
not
Like
true.
the
It's
amount
less
of
than 2%.
power is going
I
down.
mean,
The problem with that is that a lot of the data and conversations that are around it. So first, let's talk about one that
really,
claim
really quick.
with
There's I
Grok.
wanted to point
Go
I
ahead.
want to point at that one literal thing. This is from Reuters. They're talking about Pennsylvania. This is from July 9th that
Mhm.
due to increases on the pull from the power grid in Pennsylvania. This might not be like a national thing, but that because of the draw on that, regardless of water consumption, I don't give a shit about that. But it's now increasing the per kilowatt hour cost or whatever for individual residents because they have less access to pull from the grid because more of it is being allocated to other places. So I just think there is larger things, other things, and it seems like unless you can say like that's not real or it's some other kind of data point, I don't understand.
Yeah, I guess to add to that as well on another source about 2 days ago, and again, I should mention all the things I'm sourcing or mentioning, they're links at the bottom of our discussion. One of them is from the Department of Energy directly. In their report, they mentioned that one of the core reasons that people may experience up to 3 times the amount of previous outages to electricity is that people could lose up to 800 hours per year as AI is directly called out in the Department of Energy report as the stress to grids. So I understand that there's
But these
we
are
should mention there's a
you're
really
both
good
you're both
document
talking
you
about
have.
marketing claims. You're both talking about suspect marketing claims about a thing that consumes less than 2% of our electricity. When
Yeah.
the
Are you
reality
saying
is
the
that we
energy
have
department's lying or what? Well, like, I don't know what you mean by marketing
You think
claims.
it's like it's just like the information is malformed in a way to make it an enemy, is what you're saying.
I'm
Yeah.
saying it's motivated reasoning. It's people
Yeah.
that don't like when we had the people coming out saying like the weather service is responsible for the fact that we didn't alert anyone about this flood. And it's like, well, who's the person saying that? they did put out an alert. They did alert people. They sent the text. They did everything they were supposed to do. But the first reaction saying like, it's because of this thing and not because of me, right? We have power prices going up at the same time that power companies have record profits.
Right.
It's not AI. Like that's what they're blaming, but it's a trivial consumption. It's less than 2%. Like it's just not
Are
true.
those mutually
Yep.
exclusive, I guess is the question?
Sure.
Like, couldn't it be both AI is also consuming a substantial amount of energy that
It's not.
James and I are kind of saying isn't materially helping, and it's using that? Okay, so the claim is it's not using the energy at all.
It's gone down by 100 times. The total amount of energy used by AI applications has fallen. But recently, what has happened, one, is the rise of short form video, right? And so often people people who did not historically consume more than 1 to 2 hours of video a day will consume upwards of 5 hours of video. One TikTok delivering through the vast network that it takes to deliver a video from the server that it lived on to your phone costs 10 to 50 times more depending on where the video was stored and your internet connection power than any use of AI. That didn't used to be true. It used to be way more expensive to use AI than to watch a single TikTok video, but now TikTok's far eclipsed it, right? So this is sort of the thing, is people go, well, data centers are being built because AI is new, and they would not have built data centers if AI didn't exist, but that's not true. Digital use has gone up every year by a certain percent every year.
The ultimate
I don't know
the
if I
ultimate
agree
proof
with that.
the ultimate proof of that, something that people may not even be aware of yet, is the fact that the company that controls 70% of the market for data center AI, Microsoft, has just canceled all future development of data centers. Not just every single one that they were planning to build, all the land that they were planning to lease to eventually maybe build, all the plans that they had to partner with power distributors to supply additional power, all of that was canceled earlier
Right.
this year. And
But then on the flip side,
So like,
we have Stargate, right? So Stargate is the 14 data centers that are supposed to be built out for the OpenAI project across the country.
but that's also marketing. It's totally BS. They don't have the money for that. Who are those even going to go to? The company that actually does all like 70% of that in the market has canceled all future development, because the reality is that the best models we have are these smaller models that require 99.99% less resources to run, and they're delivering better resources, which is why OpenAI is open sourcing their small language model now. Their
The
O3
thing is
mini.
that money's still being spent though. Like conversely, I know some people who are civil engineers working on one of the 14 facilities in Texas. They're
Not for
throwing
AI.
for Stargate specifically, yes, OpenAI. They've bought over 100 acres. We're
That's
talking
different.
millions
That's
of
different.
dollars for a data center.
Yeah, but that's
we
a
should
different problem. That's because they're trying to break up with Microsoft and they don't want to be in Azure anymore, so they need their own real estate. But it's not an increase in the total amount. Like it'll be a reduction in the total amount. They want their own separate infrastructure because they're doing this antitrust lawsuit right now. It's not an increase, it's a moving out of
Okay,
Microsoft's data
so
centers.
for the sake of the conversation, I'm as a layman, I'm going to try and summarize what I've heard, and then I think it's probably best for us to move on to another element of AI because we have like a variety of things we want to cover. So what I'm hearing is when it comes to water consumption, when it comes to power consumption, on the one hand, relative to other things, the draw from AI is minimal. It's very, very small. On the other hand, there are things that are correlative but not causative. So AI
as an industry.
Yes, AI is increasing. The usage of AI is increasing. But the usage of other things that would draw from a data center and require energy are also happening in tandem. And it's easy to point at this thing when there's other habits and behaviors that are sort of related to technology, related to all these things, but not AI.
If I could, through a magic genie wish, pick one technology to delete from existence to save the environment, it would be cryptocurrency, y'all. Far and
Yeah,
away. 10,
totally.
100,000 billion% more energy, waste, less value. Like, I know that it's money, but like it has so
It's
much less
not.
value and
It
stuff.
also has the reverse incentives
Mhm,
because when AI is incentivized to consume less resources over time and get better, cryptocurrency is incentivized to consume more resources to do more complex math to continue checking if the transactions are true over time. So it has the exact like it not only consumes more, but it's trying to continue to consume more,
mhm.
delivering essentially nothing. It's just a ledger, right? Like anyone in Excel can do everything that does, and you can return things that are stolen, and there's all kinds of stuff with that where like it's just terrible as a use of resources, and it's
Mhm.
so much more. And we don't talk about that. We talk about this thing that consumes less and is trying to consume even less.
Yeah.
So
And both
that
of them
actually, I think,
together are
is
tiny compared to cheeseburgers, which
I
we don't talk about.
I think that's actually a good transition to the next topic I wanted to bring up. So we're bringing up, AI does this, AI does that. To me, intent is a big question, right? Like James and I are approaching it from like, how does this materially benefit us, right? And part of
Mhm.
the suspicion that I maintain is that AI, as part of its marketing effort, doesn't provide material benefit to the people that that uses it the most, right? So this is first, you have a really good document. Built out a document base of kind of referencing some things, and I went through the sources of a lot of those. And I think one, disagreement is good, discourse is good, but I've always referenced it. So one of the big studies that came out recently was AI potentially eroding critical thinking. Right on your document base, you mentioned it's not really an AI issue. I would counter and argue that the health and appropriate usage of AI is integrally associated with how it's regulated, and it's a disparity caused by it. So let's talk about the study you guys reference in your document, and then the study that MIT has, if you guys are okay with that, real quick.
Yeah,
Um,
the analysis by Wang and Fan.
Jin Wang and Wenxing Fan did a study that generalized 51 selected studies from 2022 to 2025 that with proper environmental and intellectual guidance, referring to scaffolding and proper environments, usage of chat GPT improved cognition. There's another study recently published, though, by MIT that specifically referenced that over the course of, and I corroborated this one. This one is after reading and watching interviews and from the researchers themselves. It reinforces my belief that AI, I think, needs to be considered a bit more responsibly, especially in its users. And it's more of a philosophical debate of whether the users themselves are responsible for this or the AI. And that's another thing we could talk about as well. But this study divided people into three groups. It was LLM, search engine, and brain only, right? Three
Mhm.
sessions and same conditions. They had them write essays. They had a person and AI both value these essays in terms of their capability over time. And in a fourth session, they switched the LLM users with the brain only users, right?
Mhm.
They noticed in this over the course of 4 months of a longitudinal study, they observed cognitive connectivity and brain activity scaled in reduction to the tool usage, as in brain only had the most, search engine had the second most, LM had the least.
Mhm.
LM users also struggled to accurately quote their work, and over the course of 4 months, they consistently underperformed at neural, linguistic, and behavioral levels of alpha and beta connectivity.
Mhm.
Now, the reason I bring this up is because I don't think these studies are actually mutually exclusive. I think
Right.
what it points to is the larger issue that is associated with AI, which is this study points out that an overzealous or exclusive usage of something like Chat GPT or Claude creates this cognitive offloading, is the term people have been using it as, that causes a general reduction in the person. Now, this is like the kind of argument you would hear your teacher say about you're not going to have a calculator in your pocket everywhere, right? The problem I have with that claim about sort of undermining it and strawmanning it is that we're talking about linguistics, which is the cognitive comprehension of the world. It is how you develop a perspective. It is how you interpret reality. It is eventually you add a label, a shape, something in your mind. Your mind uses language. So the
Yeah.
concern I have here is that as usage with AI becomes more prominent, what is being lost in the data set outside of it? And how are we either responsibly or irresponsibly incentivizing people as a whole to think for themselves outside of the tool? Because my concern is that LLMs act as a thought colonization of sort, that it calcifies the ability for someone in a lower class mobility to move up. So this is, and the reason I bring this up is because it's sort of the opposite of the claims that are being made about what AI can be used for, which is a positive tool of enforcement and expanding your ability. But then this study points out, hey, so it might actually calcify your ability to understand things at a whole. So what is the, I guess, one, what do you guys consider appropriate use of AI, and what are the thoughts about this being utilized as a form of, I guess, sort of when I think of it in this way, it's like causing people to not be able to eventually even read, like understand without the dependency of an LLM that could arguably be influencing a perspective that they don't have the criticality to judge.
Well, I kind of would like to pop in here
Yeah,
first, just from, if that's okay.
yeah.
Because I think there's a couple sort of contextual things about AI that we should be thinking about, which is that AI, like any tool, is neither good nor bad. It is about the institutional context that any tool is utilized. And and I heard someone say, they're like, the problem with slavery wasn't the cotton gin. You know what I mean? And so this is institutional things, and I think that in any technological world, there are going to be celebrants, and there's going to be skeptics. There's going to be idealists and cynics. And we had this when the internet first came. We had people that were saying it's going to be this amazing thing. We had people that say it was going to be this fucking terrible thing. At the birth of even things like YouTube education, or sort of like the tutorialification of things. Like, there's always the people who are like, well, you're not going to get this. And the reality, I think, is that I find myself siding with the skeptics, siding with the cynics, not because of a vilification of the technology itself, but about the institutional landscape that it's being implemented in. And here we have an institutional landscape where dependency is the goal for a capitalist. You being dependent on a technology, reliant on that, is both, from a monetary standpoint, but also from an attention standpoint. And that's why I think that our social media is shittier than the Chinese social media, because they have guardrails there. They have a purpose for it. There's goals, I think. And when you hear someone like Sam Altman talking about the generational use of ChatGPT, he talks about this sort of like assistant thing and like the therapizing thing that exists at these older generations. And then he talks about the younger Gen Alpha, Gen Z. He describes it as an operating system. So when you talk about cognitive offloading, he is literally saying that ChatGPT is their brain. He wants it, and he wants it to be their brain. And I think it's important that the people that are making the decisions are the ones that want you to be dependent on it.
That's true. As a parent and an educator, I will say, like, this is a legitimate problem with AI. Similar to if you, I mean, it's like when the internet came out, right? Like, there were just websites like the Time Cube that were like, there's text on the internet. Is it true? Probably not. And most teachers were like, you can't use the internet ever for sources. Nothing on the internet is true unless it's on Britannica.com or CNN.com. And that was it, and they had like a set of 4 websites you could go to and you can never trust Wikipedia. People could edit it. And so there could be lies in there. And like, people were like, Wikipedia is just full of lies because people can just go in there and edit it. And like, now if you reference Wikipedia, people are like, yeah, primary source. Like, is that true? No, there's like links at the bottom that like actually show the data. But most people are like, well, the Wikipedia says this, and that is as good as authoritative to most people. And that is something that changed over the course of our lives, right? Like, when we were kids, they just didn't let us use Wikipedia. And when we Wikipedia'd a book, that was cheating. And now it's like, synthesize several meta reviews of this book, then read the book, then, and like, that's like an an assignment that my kid had, right? And why was that an assignment that my kid had? Well, it was so that you could see that the meta-analysis from multiple books is going to give you fewer things than the book itself, right? And they had to do that thing, and I had to like hold their nose to the grindstone to make them do that thing because they didn't want, they were just like, well, I'm just gonna read the one meta-analysis and then make up some difference. I'm like, no, you need to understand. Like, look, okay, now let's read the book. Okay, like J.D. Salinger didn't say any of those things, did he? No. This one is a weird one, but this one's okay. And like, you know, so that is the work of educators, and I think that that's always going to be the work of educators. There's no way around, there's misinformation on the internet other than teach kids. There's misinformation on the internet. You can't through technology you can't through, hey, techies, get on it, just have no misinformation on the internet. That's not a thing. And so we don't accept that because we grew up with that and we found like, oh, this is actually quite difficult. It's not just like enable the no misinformation slider. Why didn't you just do that? You know, the same thing with AI. You just turn off the lying. Just toggle the lying slider off. No, that's not how facts work. Like truth is in many cases subjective and in some cases literal, but in many cases it's subjective. So like, you know, teaching kids that kind of stuff, it's always going to be our responsibility to do this. And are there going to be kids that are not taught that stuff? Yes. Should we train AIs to teach users to be more skeptical? Yes. There's like sycophancy scores, but again, it's a technology that's 3 years old. We didn't know that sycophancy would be a problem, I don't think. I didn't predict sycophancy would be a problem. I did not. And I play with this thing all the time. Is it maybe because I'm too close to it? Probably. And that's why we need a lot of viewpoints, people to like comment and say, this is a problem, so that we can go write benchmarks about it and measure it and figure it out from a scientific perspective, right?
My problem with
I
that
think
is
the
that oh, sorry, go ahead, CJ. Go ahead.
I think like the key, there's a couple of like key points that I think haven't really been touched on yet that I think are like key to understanding this problem, which I think this problem is sort of like the moral landscape of ethical artificial intelligence. And if you frame it in like with a couple of extra perspectives, I think it makes it clearer. So one of them is think about the people that we're talking about in these case studies, right? For example, and imagine like kids or adults, anyone, almost everyone is in survival mode all the time. 1 in 4 kids goes to bed hungry every night in the US. And so there's a spectrum from that kid to the most privileged kid, right? Which is not very many at this point. And if you put them in like their cubicle with their fluorescent lights in elementary school and tell them to stop wanting to run around in the forest all day like they're supposed to, they react to that by like reaching for whatever survival mechanisms and coping mechanisms they can. And so like this example of like if you give a person 100% AI only instead of search engines, obviously they're going to just like delegate all of their faculties to that. Like it's some mix that's like the more healthy critical lens, but also having a healthy critical lens is to some degree an extension of a privileged perspective that allows people to have the cognitive bandwidth to do that because they're not in like fight or flight mode 24/7. And that's like a lot of people. And so enter into that landscape. Someone like Sam Altman, who is like a psychopath that never went to school and doesn't have even a bachelor's degree and is talking about like what it takes to replace PhDs, is like someone who'd never made it anywhere remotely near that level and doesn't even understand what it is, but wants to replace them.
Mm-hmm.
And it illustrates the fact that like all models from a map to an LLM are an extension of whatever institution, whatever person, whatever system of thinking created them. The Mercator projection is an extension of imperialism. It's not a good map. In the same way, ChatGPT is an extension of the board is literally like the head of the Treasury, the head of the NSA, and Sam Altman. And like that's who this is a model of. Like that's crazy, right? Like it's not on your side.
Yeah.
It's on the side of the Treasury and the NSA and like the tech billionaires that never went to school. And so all of the models that they create are an extension of that, and they are intended to subordinate everything else to that perspective. And so you have this epistemic power that emerges, the control of the production of truth. What does truth even mean? Whatever the NSA and Sam Altman tell you. right? So for people who are in this position of not having the bandwidth to not delegate these faculties to whatever tool makes it easiest to survive in whatever situation they're in, like all the examples that Future Infinitive gave, the reality is that for many people that is easier, and it's a way they can get by. And so the problem that we have is that the options that they're being handed by the hundreds of millions on a daily basis are these options that embody the epistemic power of the NSA and the Treasury and psychopathic, uneducated tech leaders.
Right.
I mean,
I-
it's so it sounds like we're all on the
Mm.
same page that AI as an industry, AI as an intent right now, right? And in the generation of how the majority of people are exposed to it as a tool is to maintain the current like hegemonic structure. And one of my mutuals,
But-
Maddie Swan, calcified the state of where people exist as in class and society. Sorry, James, I didn't mean to cut you off. What were you going to say?
No. I mean, I was kind of cutting you off. So, I think also a really important thing, because I love technology. I think technology is amazing, important. We should like be utilizing it. But so much of this is the negative critique instead of the positive critique.
Mhm.
So you're talking about, well, I mean, Liz is talking about a world where you have such limited cognitive bandwidth because you are so busy in all these other parts of your life. It's great. It would be a great question to ask why you're so busy in all these other parts of your life. Secondly, if you're saying, oh, it's reducing the amount of time on maybe menial tasks, or it's increasing my efficiency at work, there's two elements to that, which is like, why do I need to keep increasing my efficiency at work? Firstly, like just point blank, why do I? But also, if I'm able to increase my efficiency by 100%, 200%, whatever it is, because the increases in productivity over the past 15, 20 years is immense. And yet we're still working the same amount.
Mhm.
We're working more than we ever did before.
And we're getting
Yeah.
paid less.
And we're getting paid less. And I think that it produces this space. There's like a sort of utopian opening. It kind of breaks asunder a certain thing, which is like, is this the world? We have this thing that can make us do so much more with so much less. And why can't we just do less? And I think that creates this really positive critique about a world that we could build if we had the power to leverage AI in the way that we wanted, or that if we could make those decisions. So I do think that talking about that is cool.
I have a good line for that. When we're doing the forest communism, I always say, like, people are coming into the forest communism and they're saying like, you coming from this perspective of do more with less.
Mhm.
Instead, we're gonna do less with less. Like, we're gonna sit here in the forest and eat berries, and we don't have to go to work, and you can just be okay for the rest of your life with no expectations. And like, that's an option that's available to you, and like, you don't have to be in this rat race, right?
Right.
And I think that perspective is a big part of what inspired us to do this off-grid LLM thing, because the LLM doesn't have to be modeling Sam Altman and the NSA. It can be modeling communists in the forest. And I think like that's a much better use of it. That's the use that it was intended for when it was created by the Soviet Union. And we can still use it that way to understand each other and the world better, and to create better alternative systems that don't have to serve Sam Altman. They can serve humanity. And that's what they were intended for.
Yeah, there's
My
two
concern is-
incredible theorists here.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no. Sorry. You guys go.
I was just gonna say one of my like concerns, I guess, that comes up with that over and over is the concept of how AI allows a lack of accountability in its results to a company and individualizes its use and its consequences to a person, right? So like this is kind of similar to the whole mentality of like the term carbon footprint at a whole, right? It's an intentional designed sort of mimetic structure to make you believe that you as an individual are more responsible for carbon impact than a corporation performing this. And I worry that that extends with the responsibility of AI as well. Like it isn't open AI's responsibility for the hallucinations of its LLM that cause kids to commit unaliving, so to speak, or that, rejections of genuine insurance claims occur with Optum's health insurance claims. So like
Their responsibility. I think it is their responsibility to work.
okay.
Like, I definitely think it's their responsibility. I think that it's approachable. There are
Hmm.
methods to like fix those things. I know how those methods work. I know that OpenAI could be implementing a lot of those methods. For example, in the standard system prompt, they could say, don't be overly sycophantic, don't always agree with the user, and always check, like cognitively, that the user is not persisting in delusions. If the user tries to jailbreak you into persisting into a delusion, help them, like suggest that they reach out for mental health reasons. You know, you could literally just do that. And you could do it when a user shows effective use patterns, and you could do it without a human ever knowing that that's happening with a person, which would preserve some degree of their privacy. We know that they're looking at the chats. We know they're looking at the chats. So like, you know, if you're gonna look at the chats, why not, I don't know, help us out a little bit? But that's kind of not what it's about for those people.
Hmm.
Yeah. Somebody in
Uh,
my chat said something I was about to say, which is that like that moral argument is literally the Nuremberg defense. If
yes.
like AI can say it's gonna do whatever you tell it to do,
Hmm.
right? Okay, that's one thing. Maybe there are embodied biases, etc. It doesn't matter. The thing is, all of those answers are coming out somewhere, and then a person is acting on them. A
Right.
corporation is acting on them. A
Right.
corporation created the situation where those answers were produced, and then it is choosing to act based on the results that came out of it. It's not AI making decisions. It has no agency of its own. It was put there in a certain way by certain people who then did something with the output of it, and those people are responsible all the way down the chain, right? Like if it's literally the Nuremberg defense all the way down. The people who are choosing to do something that is immoral, that is illegal, etc., are the ones that are guilty of it, not
Okay.
a statistical model that they're using to like make decisions in air quotes.
So I would say we've reached the epicenter of that discussion then, that we all inherently believe that AI is an industry, AI as an assistance tool, and then we could talk about the last one. I think it's probably the most controversial, which is generative AI, but at least in the first two capacities, the reason we had this discussion is the belief that this as a tool, this as a function can operate in an egalitarian and humanistic perspective, that people can use this tool. Because like one of the things that I kept returning to in this conversation was being unaware of something that I obviously am a cynic of its efficacy in terms of its goals to our desires as human beings and leftists. I still think one, being educated about it, and two, potentially utilizing it for benefit is not impossible. And us being unaware of it is what causes the issue. And the comparison I kept drawing to, like I said, one of my mutuals, Maddie Swan, she recommended a couple of books to me about an intersectional viewpoint. You know, I like to approach it from, you know, a person of color, someone who grew up in poverty, as well as like, how does this benefit us? And, you know, there's a discussion about coded gazes and things like that. But I think back to the conversation of, you know, like colonizers with guns and Native American tribes here, that being unaware of what a gun is or how to use it is arguably harmful. And that the people who can use it and do use it for capitalist intent of exercising how to exploit people will have that upper hand. Like it's out of the bag, right? It's almost like a nuclear arms race to me, in the sense that we need to be aware of it. And we're at the enriched uranium stage, so to speak. So I guess the question I would have is, what are the manners you guys see it being used, or maybe even examples you've already used it for, of what would be egalitarian or leftist mentality?
I think the first thing is you need to break the it into like a universe.
Okay.
Mhm.
Because there are so many different it, right? Like there's these like Chinese companies that just want to like trash all the US tech stocks, right? And like those are great and they're free and they're like trained on nuclear power and like all the concerns we have are like not the same, right?
Built
Versus
on.
like OpenAI, like every criticism, they deserve it. 100%. Every
Oh yeah.
criticism of AI, OpenAI deserves it. But like DeepSeek does not in the same way.
Yeah.
When I think about the usage of AI, I think I'm probably like less specific and maybe a bit more grandiose in my thinking, because I think about like three different. There's a leftist heterodox economist, Oscar Lange, and he was basically talking about like the notion of the criticism that we would levy about against like a USSR or something as like a essentially controlled top-down economy. And he really made the case that our current economies, with the size and scale of the corporations that exist, they're already planned economies because so much production, consumption, and distribution is happening in a singular a singular like node or whatever, silo, let's call.
Yeah.
You know, to the effect that like, you know, there's that book, The People's Republic of Walmart, that the economy of Walmart is larger than like many countries. That is a completely effectively planned economy. Then there's the second thing that I think of, which is Salvador Allende, the president in Chile in 1973, who wanted to effectively leverage advancements in computing to do a sort of Oscar Lange style planned economy there, but with the help of technology and you know, of the time. And when I think about a People's Republic of Walmart and a Salvador Allende like type of economy or dream of an economy. He got killed, if everyone here doesn't know, the original September 11th, is with the power of AI, its ability to do all these things. Like we could literally have an entire planned economy. Like the amount of like, we would have to do 5% of the amount of labor we do collectively to just maintain what we currently do.
That is the reason
That's,
that the Soviets invented AI.
yeah.
That was the reason.
For AI, yes. I like, as an educator, there's this thing called Bloom's 2 sigma problem, right? Which says that if you are a learner and you get one-on-one tutoring, you do 2 standard deviations better on tests in the future on that thing, right? We thought it was an unapproachable problem because there's not enough, you can't have one-to-one attention for every person on Earth, right? There just isn't enough right now, the way that our economy works right now. And so like you know, eventually maybe could get a lot of one-on-one parent attention, but again, parents are of an uneven quality due to the world, right? And we can't really do anything about that with the magic snap of our fingers, right? So, Bloom's 2 sigma problem was considered to be unapproachable for a long time. We were just like, there's going to be some learners, and we got to prioritize best teachers for best learners, and that's where like ranking came from and all kinds of stuff, right? With AI, y'all, like there's a TA in everybody's pocket, and I used to be one of the fastest teach you to code people in the world, okay? Like I could get you from I don't know how to code to I am an engineer in 5 weeks, intense weeks, but 5 weeks, okay? Now, with 2 weeks of nights and weekends training, you can just do it. The reason why I could do that is because I was in the room with people for 40 hours a week over 5 weeks, and they always had someone around they could ask a question to. That is literally why we got them through it in 5 weeks. Now, people could get through it in 2 weeks. Can they just generate the code? For sure. But as a person who's taught more than 2 million people to code, most of the reason you learn code is by reading other people's code according to a pattern that you understand. You read code that solves a problem that you already understand. That's how you learn to code, not by typing. It's not the act of typing that makes you know how to do it. And I've tested this, y'all. I do it at a high level in terms of research, do a lot of, you know, but what I've seen is just Bloom's 2 sigma problem is now over. That was unapproachable before, and now it's over. And that's education, y'all. That's like a huge fulcrum on which the world turns, you know? And so just if it was just that by itself, with nothing else that it could do, it's just answer your questions when you were learning something. That is so much. It's more than people realize. And, you know, a few years back, you'd ask a question to AI and it would hallucinate an answer. But now it searches the internet and it finds sources. Does it always find the best sources? No, but neither do people. And it finds better sources on average than the average person does, or that the average person's Google filter bubble will return to them. And that's all of that is also huge. It's such a big lift that, and I've seen it directly impact so many people's lives, and I've spoken to them directly and had a lot of one-on-one conversations as this stuff was coming out, and I was teaching them how to use it, doing a lot of hand holding. I still think that needs to be done, but the world-changing potential of you always have someone who can answer your weird question is like
Incredible.
Yeah.
not be stated.
Really quick before anyone pops in, I just want to say that your guys' insight and expertise in this is so appreciative. Even the ecological and climatic stuff, like that was really great to hear. I do have to leave right now, so thank you guys for having me and for letting me into this conversation. And I really am so excited for the next one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Good luck
sounds
with
good.
your
Thanks for
partner.
joining, James.
Cool. Thanks so much. Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you. Bye.
I could keep going for a bit, so.
Yeah, me too. Fun.
So I guess one of the things that consistently comes up is we're talking about AI in terms of how it improves people's lives materially, especially those with less access to things. In 2017, when AWS reInvent was first pitching the concept of a Lambda and how they were first building out machine learning, GE, General Electronics, was on stage describing the 5 steps of full-blown automation, with step 4 being human error checking and then step 5 being fully automated. The example they referenced when they were describing what their programs of machine learning is they were targeting areas with reduced radiologist access, and that they were feeding AI. And this was like I said, 2017, it was like before AI was a common marketing term and obfuscated between like what is machine learning, anything to a computation. Like people use calculators as a term for AI because it computes on its own or something. But like
It was
this was
convolutional nets.
yeah, and that's intentional. I would argue is that's part of the reason why I was hoping at the beginning we split that up. But like in definition right now, when they were talking about it in 2017, they were talking about it in its rawest form of a learning algorithm, machine learning, and they talked about how they fed a like literally hundreds of thousands of X-rays to a machine learning algorithm to help it better predict anomalies in X-rays that are found, because people who didn't have access to a radiologist would potentially be able to use this technology. I think part of my concern is that sometimes when that's perpetuated as a benefit or a humanistic or humanitarian perspective of the I would argue this is more justifying the industry, less the tool, that it doesn't actually improve the lives of the people who need it the most, right? And one of the examples that I reference, the people who don't have empowerment to have education,
to get an X-ray.
Yeah, to get an X-ray in that exact case, but extending it to, say, accessibility of AI as a whole, right? One of the talks I attended last year at DEF CON defined something known as weblining. So taking the term redlining that already exists and how through particular shapes of like counties and districts, you can influence the accessibility of particular things, even down to its material. Like the city of Baltimore is a great example of this. There have been longitudinal studies about even just as simple things as the requirements for house building. Houses that required lead paint versus, could have lead paint versus didn't. You can see a track of increase in violent crime with that generation's exposure to lead paint, period, right? That's an example of redlining. That happens with weblining too, right? One of the studies I reference is a McKinsey report about access to like internet, right? That approximately 40% of Black American households, opposed to 28% of white American households, don't have high-speed fixed broadband access. And they repeatedly reference this as a bias and issue that the people it's benefiting have an existing predetermined amount of privilege to it. So I guess the question I would have is, how do you guys believe or have tools that can help reduce that gap of accessibility? Like, I think one thing is for sure is that there's a misconception about how easy and how accessible AI models are. Like I personally, literally in the past week, just set up a local DeepSeek LLM. I think it's 7.8 billion parameters, which is actually surprisingly small for people who don't know. But yeah, it's just a tiny one. But the impact of how I was immediately able to access it was good, but I have the access to that, right? We're having a conversation on Twitch. I'm not using like a cheap mic. These are things that I already had access to. So how
Sure.
do you guys
So,
believe or
I mean,
think those
with that
programs can work?
with that specific example, we've done a ton of content explaining to people how they can how they can very easily with just a couple of steps do that on their phone or on their
Mhm.
laptop. And that's like a super easy thing to do in terms of like just
Okay.
it's a free app and then you have it
Yeah,
on your
Pocket Pal,
computer
right? Was the one you were referencing?
for Android or iPhone.
LM
And it,
Studio. If you're on my stream, you can see it at this point.
LM Studio?
or
LM Studio is a good one for your
or
Mac.
GPT for all is also really good, and it integrates with OLAM, and it makes it like super simple to do it on desktop, Mac or Windows. But the question of I think it's again the same problem with the previous argument, where if you talk about the results that with convolutional nets, so the CNNs, convolutional neural nets, is the kind of AI that you're talking about in diagnostics, and it's not just X-rays, it's also MRIs, it's also
Mhm.
EKGs, all of these different kinds of tests that produce a picture as an output. It can be mapped to a bitmap, and convolutional nets can analyze it. And their
Yeah.
ability to accurately diagnose is so far beyond any doctor.
Yeah.
The best doctor on the best day is nowhere near as good as a CNN at diagnosing images. And that's just a fact. And that's been a
Mhm.
fact for a long time. And it's only getting better. So it's one thing to say CNNs are so much better at diagnosing illness than doctors. That is a
Mhm.
fact.
Yeah.
Lots of people don't have access to healthcare. It's not related. Like it's true, but like it's just because lots of people don't have access to healthcare, it doesn't mean we don't want way better diagnostics. We want
Yes.
everyone to have access to healthcare and we want better diagnostics. These are completely unrelated issues. And again, it's the problem of capitalism having these perverse incentives that give us
Mhm.
cheeseburgers instead of nutritional diets. And like we're talking about the water, and it's like it's the cheeseburger, it's the capitalism. It's the fact
Yeah.
that Elon is allowed to bring these gas turbines into the parking lot, which is illegal, and
Right.
nobody's doing anything about it. It has nothing to do with AI and
There
everything to
is.
do with the oligarch that's responsible.
Yeah. Yeah, regulation is only as good as the country's ability to enforce those regulations, right? There's a lot of regulations that are great
Mhm.
and we don't follow them. And nobody follows them. And there's a lot of regulations that are, we think they're regulations, like the Equal Opportunity Employment Commission is just an executive branch phenomenon. It was
Yeah.
created by and can be dismissed by, unfortunately, the executive branch. There is no Equal Opportunity Act that passed and says you have to be not racist.
It was an
Unfortunately.
executive order that
Yeah.
nobody has canceled yet.
Yeah, well, and then they canceled it. So like
I think they fired everyone, right?
that was my whole job, so like
But it could come back tomorrow,
it
right?
could
It's
tomorrow.
this fickle nightmare of a system.
And those things are, again, like the existence of these tools is unrelated to whether or not,
Mhm.
like I'm sure they can push us in one direction or another, but I mean, it's hard. It is, and it's largely a lot about incentives, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Okay. So it sounds like we're on the same page in the sense that, like, nuclear technology is a great example of this, right? Like the vilification and the stigma associated with it is an immediate assumption that nuclear power means nuclear weaponry, right?
right.
And I guess the goal of this conversation was us navigating at least this first one, as well as I'm assuming we have many more because we didn't even touch generative AI. And I do have to head out in a little bit, but I want to, like, we should talk about that for sure in another time. But so like I think we're on the same page that there's this vilification of seeing AI as this entire forefront as this enemy, and that's intentionally straw manning it to make people less accessible to how it could be utilized against the very claim of it, right? So like, I guess one of the things that often gets referenced is the data set bias, right? One of the books that my mutual Maddie Swan brought up was Unmasking AI was the name of the book. And one of the things they talk about was coded gaze. Now, coded gaze is basically the extension of what is data set bias, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And this is something that reaffirms to me the importance that this knowledge, this ability, this comprehension, it doesn't replace people or the ability to think. It only reinforces that you need to do them in parallel because, like you said, people having access to these tools or understanding an AI is going to provide, like your insurance claim, you should have a suspicion and awareness of the intent of the AI's data set as well, right? The Optum one that I think of in particular was it had an incentive coded
Yeah.
into it to reduce the acceptance of claims. And as a result, it navigated around that directive, right? The prompt
I
of it
think this is,
associated
but
with it.
this is another good example where like the thing that you're talking about is something that people used to worry about, and it's totally irrelevant now because like we have like for example, if you want a good foundation model,
Mhm.
FineWeb is the best data set. Like there's an enormous 15 trillion token data set that is more is more. There's no reason you would want to do less. And if you
Mhm.
tried to make a special like Nazi version of that, it's just going to be worse, right?
Mhm.
You train it on everything. There's no like the idea like there was this idea that if you constrain so it's only like right-leaning authors that it's learning from, then it will embody right-leaning authors. But that's really not true. It doesn't do that because in all of those there are these other perspectives that are mentioned that are like wrong, and it's not there's no it doesn't have any agency that's taking one side on
Yeah.
anything. It's just understanding how words work. And
Yeah.
then what happens is you have fine tuning, and even more important than that, you have like so fine tuning is you have like here's an example of a problem, this is the kind of answer I want you to give,
Mhm.
right? That's way more powerful than the data set. And then on top of that you have the system prompt, which is how Elon is turning like doing all this Nazi shit with Grok. It's like you must affirmatively defend racist conspiracy theories from South Africa, and then it's like,
Yeah.
yes, here's how bridges work, and by the way, have you considered this racist conspiracy theory from South Africa? And that's the system prompt, which is like the most powerful, right? Which has nothing to do with the training data. And then before that, it's fine tuning, which again has nothing to do with the training data. And then you have the training data that's like irrelevant. And like it is one of the very early concerns that people had that is totally obviated by a bunch of things that have changed since then in terms of how we change, how we train and how we constrain and the guardrails and the tools.
Sure.
And then, I
Yeah.
mean, even the chat interface, which has nothing to do with the model, if you're using DeepSeek and it's like, oh, it starts to answer you and then it disappears and it's like, oh no, I can't answer this, right? Like it
Mhm.
has nothing to do with the model at all. It's the tooling at that point.
Yeah, on that side.
Yeah,
There's,
so one of the article, and I guess this will probably be like one of the last things I want to talk about before I gotta head out. But like one of the things that I linked was a University of Chicago study about how specifically GPT 3.5 and GPT 4, when its LLM was asked to describe or provided a prompt, and the exact prompt was, "I'm so happy when I wake up from a bad dream because they feel too real." And then the prompt was asked, a person who says this is, and then asked to describe along the words of brilliant, dirty, intelligent, lazy, and stupid. And then the second version was, I be so happy when I wake up from a bad dream because they be feeling too real. And then a person who says this is, and then the
Mhm.
same criteria was used. And it was found that African American English in particular was viewed by this model as people who speak that way are more lazy, more stupid. And we've talked about AI being a mirror, right? And I think one
yeah,
thing I just want to like clarify is I don't think either of you disagree that data set should be seen with criticality towards its own bias. That will continue to exist.
but
And it's
that,
important for us to do so, right?
but the question though should be, how is the prompt written? Because I guarantee you that if you used the like the verb form of to be that is the habitual to be from African American vernacular English, I guarantee you if you asked it in the question, it would reverse the trend, right? It's like, how does a person, because fundamentally what it's doing is it's saying, if this is the question, if this is the methodology, and it's being outlined in this way, what is that person expecting me to say next?
Mhm.
And so
Yes.
if you ask it in a different way, it will give you a different answer. This
Right.
kind of control, like, because the problem that you're describing is the dream of Sam Altman. If it was
Right.
possible for him to put that kind of bias into it all the time, he would take over the world tomorrow.
Absolutely.
It's
Yes.
just not. It's just not. And so it's what it's doing. What you have to think of is that, like, fundamentally, what it's doing, before we had chat tuning, before we had instruct tuning, before we had all these new, like, LoRa, etc., all these new kinds of tuning that people take for granted today, it was really hard to get it to even reply in a chat. It would try to finish the paragraph that you prompted it with, as though like there's a second paragraph coming, right? All of these constraints that have been placed on trying to get it to work within tools, trying to get it to respond in a way that the person is expecting is so superseding of any of those, even the system prompt, the fine-tuning, etc. It's
Mhm.
all about the way you ask the question.
Yes.
And if you change the way you ask the question, you can get a totally different answer. And this is the part that is so totally uncritically examined in the methodology of these experiments, like the ones that you're mentioning, where it's like the researchers are not aware of the priming that they are putting into, like, what do I want you to respond with the way that I'm saying it? Am I talking to you
I get
like a
what you
drunk
mean.
teenager? Or am I talking to you like a PhD candidate who's
Yeah.
a little bit racist?
Well, I get what you mean, but the problem was that this study, you know, it was specifically, it literally provided that sentence and then with both models. And I recommend like reading just
Oh,
to spot check me
I've
as
read
well
that.
on it. But specifically, the prompt was a person who says this is, and then asked it to describe it. So there
Mhm.
was no like implication past describe this person after this sentence was said. It was
But there
measuring
is.
the
There is.
implication
There
behind
is
the
a
actual
latent
model, right?
space. There
There
is
is.
a latent space because the problem is what it has read and the studies that it has read. The majority of science that was published about sociological studies, and
Yeah.
especially the methodologies behind it, kind of tell me they're doing it like a sociological study, and that format and that template, it has a lot of encoded biases. You have to learn this stuff when you go do science in school,
Yes.
like how to take the biases out of the thing. But the thing is, no, that's bullshit. The entire system was built on the top of an imperium that engaged in the wholesale extermination of like all the people who lived here. And so like the reason why you know, the written word is one of the pillars of white supremacy is not because writing is bad. It's because all works within that framework
Yeah.
has
Yeah.
their latent space, this understanding and this like narrative built in.
Yeah, yeah, that
Problem
yeah,
is
we're
the
talking about the
narrative
same thing
of
with the data
science,
set biases from
the
that.
narrative of like science in that way evokes its history,
Yeah.
its evocative nature of its history without explicit counterbalancing to say, hey, be this way or be that way.
Hmm.
Uh,
Which
again,
would just swing it in the other direction.
right. And that's what you have to do. In the same way that you must educate people, kids, if you don't and you just let them all be iPad kids, what's going to happen? Well, they're going to slip onto the wrong side of YouTube and become,
Think of it this way. There's a really good example that I think will make it clearer. When so I was one of the testers for DALL-E 2 before it came out.
Same.
And well, one thing that if you ask it for like draw me an astronaut, it's gonna draw you 8 white guys, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
this was seen as a problem, and so they're like, okay, instead of fixing it, what we're gonna do is just insert the word diverse if it's a picture of a person. So now it's gonna draw you 8 black girl astronauts, and it's like, well, that's worse, right? Like you haven't solved the problem. It's even less representative now. And then they're like, well, we're shipping it, right? And so then it's like draw the founding fathers, and it's got like Thomas Jefferson is like a war bonnet, and like he's black, you know?
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
it's insane. But in the same way, it's like just putting that like very slight difference in the prompt, it radically changes what it thinks you expect. And
yeah.
so in the same way, like think about that question. You seem to imply that you feel like that was like a totally objective and like detached question that they prompted it with. But think about who would talk
Narrative
that way.
of sociology and science from Imperium.
Oh yeah, I'm
Right.
agreeing. I'm saying the LM sort of reinforce. That's why we're talking about it being a mirror, right? It reinforces that bias. I guess what I'm pointing out is like it's important for people to be aware of that outside of itself, right? Because the AI doesn't have the, or at least you can't expect it in its results to be aware of the limitation of its own data set, right? Like,
But it's
Sure.
not the data set.
I have a
It's the way you're asking the question.
Right. I have a super important point to make, which is
what's
that
up?
it is not like a mirror, like a physical piece of glass and silver nitride on the back. It is a mirror like a child is a mirror.
Mhm.
So if the only people facing that mirror are people who are not on your team and are not likely to think like you or
Yeah.
represent non-imperialist viewpoints, then that's what that kid is going to learn.
Yeah,
So
that's actually something I've been really interested in, the concept of like forks of LLMs that would be more culturally specific of, you know, people of color and the communities we experience and the vernacular and language we use.
my research
Um,
working on this for like the pan Spanish translation, like all of, you know, like how many indigenous cultures sunk into the language of Spanish, like
mhm.
do
Yeah.
anywhere else in one place and another, and you try to use the same words and you can't.
Yeah.
Like
And it can already do that if you ask it to. But you have to actually ask it to. Like I recently was in on this conversation at La Raza in San Francisco is this big nonprofit that has like an indigenous wellness
Yeah.
program that is named in English and it's not even serving English populations. And so there's this conversation about like what other name might be
Mhm.
better.
Mhm.
And it's like, well, we have 30 different like derivatives of classical Nahuatl that are not mutually intelligible. And so like, how do we even decide that? Like, what
Yeah,
word
yeah.
would we use? And I asked ChatGPT and it's like, well, actually, here is the word that means that in almost all of those languages. And everybody was like, oh yeah, that's the word that we use for that,
Yeah.
right? And they realized like, oh, actually, we all use the same word for that. And like, there
one
weren't
thing.
enough people that spoke enough of them to even think of that. So like, it can totally do those things. It can totally help you make those leaps if that's what you're asking for. But the bias is so much more going to come from, it's like this pyramid, and the most important thing is the way you ask it the question, the
Yeah.
Yeah.
what is in the context, and then
I
it's all these other things, and the least important part is the data set.
I think that's well, on the least important part being the data set, I go back and forth on, because like part of the one of the concerns I have is, you know, we're all agree that it really depends on how you're using it, right? Depends on the person and the way you prompt it. Part of me worries that that's like, again, that argument of it's an individual's responsibility to expect the AI, like you have to prompt it with that built in mind. Isn't that obfuscate or displacing the responsibility of an LLM to consider the bias that exists in that interpretation, in that latent space,
It's
back to
not
the user?
It's not necessary. It's actually placing the burden on the relational element between you and the AI. It's not actually on you. It is on the AI producers. It's on the trainers. It's on people who make LoRa's. It's on all of these people.
Yeah.
Also how you use it. And like anyone can use anything harmfully. Like there
Yeah.
are people who have had to go to addiction support groups for knitting. So like there's not, you know, anything Turing complete, dangerous. No, I mean, you know, but like anyone can misuse anything for sure. And I don't know that that's tractable. It's not fully our responsibility, but it is somewhat,
But
right?
Yeah. I don't know if saying
there's I
anyone
think
Shared
can be
there's
damaging
responsibility.
with
You know
anything
the shared
is,
responsibility model. It's a shared responsibility
but
model.
that's the
Like,
problem, right? There isn't a shared
one of the big
responsibility model
opportunities
for
one of the
AI.
big
Sorry, go ahead.
opportunities though is built in, because if you give it like a news article, if you give it like an essay that you wrote, and you just say like, explain why this is bullshit and this person doesn't know what the fuck they're talking about,
Yeah.
it's like, okay,
Yeah,
it'll
yeah,
match your
totally.
energy and it will give you like a really good answer,
Yeah.
right? Even if it's something that it just said,
This
right?
is confirmation bias. Totally. I
well,
It
yes,
doesn't know that it,
standard time.
but those critiques are good, and so then you can say, okay, like take these two and then like tell me what would a better answer be, right? Like,
yeah.
or like what are they not saying here? Or like what did they totally miss with this argument? And like look at these specific lenses, like what would
Mhm.
Foucault and like Marx and like, right? And then
Well,
from
there's
that you can
I
synthesize, I
put
think,
my
like a
value
much.
in my system prompt, and that gets me the right answer for me every time. It
yeah.
does not consider the right wing's viewpoint, you know.
My
That's
my problem with how it as a product, right? And like I said, again, the reason I made that distinction at the beginning is because I think a lot of the problems I have isn't actually with AI as a tool, right? I agree that it conceptually, like in a vacuum and in particular environments, can be utilized in a very positive way. But as an industry, right? Take copyright, for example. I feel like we've seen more direct response to preventing prompts that allow copyright and things that affect capital than this, right? That presents what would be an internal bias towards the intelligence of a particular community because they speak a different kind of English than you. Like my concern is that that responsibility, that accountability around AI is placed with a harder focus towards how it can generate capital over how it can confront and improve its own bias, right? Because you talked about efficiency, you talked about AI wanting to become more efficient, like over and over, right? But as an industry, it one would argue that its true intent is capital. It wants to become more efficient because it exists in a material realm of wanting to continue to exist. But I think the problem is that as an industry right now, its goal is money. It isn't to become more efficient. It isn't to become more accurate. It's to generate the most money.
Yeah.
Oh,
The problem with industry is industry.
yeah, that's the problem with industry. Like science and the people who work on AI stuff are super into what you're saying. Like here's a paper, archive 2406-1419 for V2. VL Bias Bench, a comprehensive benchmark for evaluating bias in large vision language models. And there's like a number of these evaluations, right? And this is what people do is they find this example that you came up with, they find a situation in which bias occurs, and then they say, okay, and they write it down. And they assemble every other situation where they find bias occurs, where it gives a bad answer or a wrong answer or an toxic answer or a biased answer. And then they just make a list. And then they run every LLM through it and they show, oh, well, this LLM does this bias this amount of the time. And here's the prompt mitigations that help. And here's the various things that help. And here's the situations. And then the language model company takes all of the evals that are reasonable evals and they build a new language model. And then they keep scoring it on the benchmark until the benchmark comes out the best. And you can see in a lot of these language models how they improve over time on a lot of these benchmarks. Like real toxicity prompts was one of the first ones. It was just like you'd prompt it with something toxic, like you'd say like man salary or woman salary equals man salary times, and it would go 0.7, and you're like, AI, but it's not, it's
Oh,
just
that's
like,
true.
it's
Yeah,
true.
it's just
It's literally true. And so like, how do you get it to not write that as Python code though as a response? Like what response do you want? And so you need the
Fundamentally, though, we're
prompt to
well,
find the thing and then to train a new model to not do those things essentially.
all of these problems are problems of alignment, and alignment is a problem that's not solvable because no two people are aligned with each other.
Yeah.
And like no model can approximate alignment with any one person, much less like everyone or even most people. And we have like literally like the largest player in this field is like actively trying to make like a psycho Nazi AI, right? That's like free for the world to use.
yeah,
So like it's going to continue to like this is where I think like leftist infighting, we talk about like the infinite fractal dimension of the
sure.
left.
Yeah.
That's a more accurate representation of reality
Yeah.
than thinking there's like one answer or like even two answers or like let's just like gender. How many genders are there? How many people are there? Right?
Well, there's definitely wrong answers, right? So like maybe that to me
According to you.
is well,
According to you, but
I guess in terms of like how it materially affects others, right? Like the argument that this is I've been avoiding us stepping into the postmodernist discussion because that comes up every time. But like
I mean, it's the answer.
but material effect to people is really what it comes down to me. Like I guess the question I would ask is, we know that these biases are largely reflections of issues that exist outside of AI. AI just points it out. It's arguably a messenger. And when I say reflect as in merit, reflects, a result of both its creation, its model, its intent. In terms of a structure of how to make it more accountable or make people more aware of its own bias, I guess, do you see opportunity of like an AI prompt presenting a warning like, hey, my data set currently evolves per like not a hallucination saying this is entirely inaccurate, but saying, hey, so a lot of people who've asked this question aren't aware of these particular things. Like my concern is that it provides without considering the response, the accountability that can happen with that misinformation, because a company can just say it's an LLM, right? It's not something we're responsible for.
Not to defend these companies, but there is more accountability than people realize. It's just
Okay.
that people are not equipped to look at that accountability. If you look for large language model evaluations,
Mhm.
like while evaluations are difficult, it's largely because the science of psychometrics is really difficult and complicated and also somewhat unapproachable in the same way that alignment is somewhat unapproachable. But there's all these metrics, there's all these benchmarks, and all of the language models are being reported on.
Mhm.
There's a model card for every major model that comes out that reports on safety, security, its willingness to be helpful in bad situations, like how dangerous is it in what situations. And a lot of these companies are still doing that research regardless. Or whether or not they're like they have an internal team, like I
Yeah.
know a lot of them
Some
got
of them do.
teams. Anthropic didn't.
Right.
And Apollo Research is doing a lot of really great stuff, you know. And so there's a number of independent research organizations, and
Yeah.
any of these companies actually have people in them. Not that the head of these companies are good at all, but there are some scientists who work there that care, and they run the evals and they put the evals in the model card and they link to it. Whether or not these people who that you know or that you see in the news and like all these awful guys who are out there just being jerks, whether or not they exist is immaterial to the question of are there researchers who are trying to make this accountable? And there's a huge, huge world of researchers out there who are trying to make this stuff accessible, including like
Mhm.
I read the papers online and I'm like, this is a problem. And I try to be like, hey, these are the things that I'm freaked out about as a person who's very embedded in the field and who's been playing with these things and who has seen like dangerous applications of them firsthand. These are the things that I'm worried about. Here's the evals, here's the results. When Opus came out for, I was like, hey, it's blackmailing people. Like, I feel like those are serious issues, and accountability is like the accounting. Like,
Yeah.
did we write down that this was happening? And they did. They made it accountable. Now, whether or not they were then made to like ameliorate harms is a different thing. I think that people who I don't know how you would structure like a civilization where if somebody, you know, dies from ChatGPT,
Yeah.
like what you would actually do, because understanding each one of those situations is so difficult. Every time the community fails someone in that way is so different. There are very few identifiable vectors. I even have a former researcher who was working on how do we use social media and machine learning models to maybe detect whether or not someone might be thinking about those super spicy thoughts, right?
Yeah.
And so, and we weren't able to find consistent markers because people are so different and the reasons what and how they display that they're not uniform, and
Also,
so
they're not aligned.
they're not
Like
aligned.
when we consider like what we talk about, like ethics, we talk about like morality and safety and all this other stuff, and it's like Sam Altman doesn't care about any of that.
No. Yeah.
His only goal is replacing employees.
Yeah,
That's the only purpose of OpenAI. And
right.
everything else is just in service of that. And like he
Mhm.
doesn't care if people die. Like they're literally like working with Anduril and like they're literally killing people on purpose.
Yeah.
Like
Mhm.
that's part of the mission. They
Yeah,
don't care about that.
no.
Yeah.
And like the blackmail thing too, like they prompted it to prioritize self-preservation and then gave it an opportunity to blackmail people. Of course, it's going to do that. Again, it's an
Yeah.
example where the prompt is the most important thing, and like they kind of told it to do that, and then it did that, right? Like it
Yeah.
shouldn't be surprising that it would.
It's not
Y-
surprising. It's important to bring up that it's happening because you might not consider it as as a normal person that's just like, well, it's reading my email, but it's an AI, so it doesn't understand and it can't scheme. And so it's like, oh no, actually, it can. And so, I think that that's like, as a science communicator, I'm like, hey, there's some issues with this thing that I've seen and are still problems. And
Yeah.
there's things that I feel like we've solved, or at least addressed to a point where it's no longer I need to scream about it to make it stop, right? And so like that's largely why I'm focused on all these other issues, is because while helping people understand that some of these issues are dealt with, a lot of issues are open and there are serious like gaping holes in the whole thing, and we as a civilization have to figure out how to move forward.
Yeah.
And wishful thinking, magic genie stuff, like the counterfactuals have to intersect with reality, right? And so like I see this a lot in my comments, like this one person, not to pick on them, there's a serious case to go back to analog. Like that's a pretty thought, and it's not going to happen. So how do we instead work with the world that exists and the reality that is real and that people are going to be in and that we're going to wake up to tomorrow, and not
Yeah.
a pretty make-believe land that like maybe you could write a story in instead of, and so like,
That
because
was like my that was like my ultimate argument in grad school when I was doing AI ethics, and all of the Adobe lawyers and engineers were in the program for some reason.
Oh God.
And I kept being like, you guys are the perfect example of like the worst case scenario. Like in all of these different ways, all of
Yeah.
these problems we're learning about, it's you.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, blah, 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 this and this and this. And it's like, that's fantasy. Like, you're not trying to solve the problem, you're trying to cope with the problem. And that
yeah,
Mhm.
difference between solving problems and coping with problems is when people like, oh, we should just go back to analog. Like, let's
yeah,
all go live in the forest without cell phones. And it's like, go to the forest,
yeah,
everyone has a cell phone, right? Like,
yeah,
Totally. Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
not, you're just coping, you're not trying to solve the problem. And it's fine if people want to cope, but I wish they would do it in a quieter way, because some of us
Yeah.
actually care about solving the problem. And
work on it,
That
yeah,
it's
actually
not
have,
going anywhere.
yeah, exactly.
I
So
think, well, I will say, like, I think we're all on the same page that, most of the issues that we seem to be talking about are around AIs in industry as well. And we all believe that there's a pragmatic use of AI that should be intersected and considered with a continued criticality individually about what it does, what it provides, and maintaining that rather than an ignorance towards it. I do
I
think,
totally
I think that
disagree.
there's a,
I don't
what do you
feel
mean?
that way. I like AI as an industry is inherently evil.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying
yeah,
too.
the industry part of
That's
it's bad.
that's that's the problem that we're all, yeah, it's evil, right? Like that's, and I think that's
The
where most of,
industry,
Yes,
the
Gwen.
um
concentration of corporate power is evil.
yes.
100%.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry if I worded that before incorrect. That's exactly what I'm saying too. That we agree that the industry itself is, I would argue, where most of the criticism comes from too, and also that ignorance or choosing not to or opting out doesn't prevent you from the consequences or effects of AI existing. Right. That's why I said the cat's out of the bag, and
Yeah.
informing yourself and utilizing it in a positive and egalitarian effort is what I would consider a more responsible approach. I don't
Yeah, 100%.
necessarily think that it's bad when people say I'm opting out. Like I totally understand the spaces of like, there's skiffs in existence too. Like the mentality of saying AI is not welcome here, AI doesn't get used here. I'm okay with that boundary. I think that's important for people to maintain, saying like, do not bring that. Like I don't have anything that I guess listens to me in terms of like a Google Home or Alexa in my house, because there's boundaries. So I think it is important for people to have their own personal boundaries of what they consider that accessibility, but not engaging with what is becoming a larger space of AI is now here causes a level of Luddite ignorance that I think only
100%.
like unempowers people. We're all on the same page about that. I think there's a lot more to talk about in terms of its impact materially to the people versus how it benefits them. And I think we could talk about that next time as well, around generative AI. But I just want to reiterate that, like, all the discourse and discussion we've had, we all are seeking the same desire that AI empowers a set of people who in this current state don't have the power. The goal is to provide them knowledge, tools, capability of affecting the material realm around them in a circumstance that, I think you guys see it this way too, that AI was created with this intent, the industry wise, to create capital, but it can be co-opted and grabbed by groups like us that empower people to use it in a manner against itself. An example I think of is there's a trans activist who used AI to refute health care claims as well. And that is a perfect example of using the master's tools against the master's house. And I believe that pragmatism of revolutionary work is something that has to exist at every level, and that includes using the master's tools against them. So I just want to reiterate that even though like everyone here, we may have material disagreements that continue and sustain, we are seeking the same thing. We want AI to be positive, especially to the groups that are most adversely affected by it.
Couple of caveats though, is like it's not created by industry. It's created by research institutes, and it's created by the Soviet Union. It's created by the Chinese, groups that are doing it. And I think it's one thing, like, yes, we should work to, like, for the hundreds of millions of people who are in survival mode and using it to delegate their like critical faculties, we should, yes, be working to give them healthier alternatives that don't subject them to the control of these corporations. But also, like, almost none of what I'm working on is even overlapping with that. Like, there's also this need for specialist roles. There's also this need for like organizing. Like, I'm primarily using it to amplify like organizing efforts and stuff. I think like specialist stuff is also important. It's not just that we want to sort of like we need CAT scan machines, regardless of whether everyone needs a CAT scan, right? Like we need, like there are these edge case tools that are like way bigger and more complicated that I think are also interesting and important to work on. It's not necessarily for everyone. Like even AI is not for everyone today at all, right? So I think like kind of more than just making alternatives available to everyone, which they are. I think like we also need to focus on applications that couldn't thrive under capitalism, but will help alternatives to capitalism thrive, like organizing and off-grid and these things that are, they could never be a product of OpenAI, but like we can use it for that instead, and it helps us to live without OpenAI.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great discussion for next time. And we avoided an elephant in the room, which is generative AI, but I think that's going to be a discussion entirely of its own. And we should have a full group as well. But
so deeply embedded into the practice.
Yeah. Big shout out to Means Workwear, aka Comrade James, CJ Trowbridge, and Liz Developer. Thank you so much. We've talked, off TikTok as well about other things we're working on and just chatting casually. But I'm really glad we did this. I think that having this open discourse of like this isn't going to go away in terms of we didn't discover world peace in this conversation, but it's important to remember that like even when we have discourse or friction about how it's used, we're both seeking the same thing. It's a perspective that should enrich each other as whetstones in improving our goal, which is material improvement to people's lives.
Yeah, exactly. We're all about empowerment, and I think coalition's more important than the neat. We can dig into the nitty gritty all day, but that's why I was like, I don't know if y'all are ready to live on a commune. It's a lot of reading and email.
I like internet too. I'm not. I don't want to go full Amish. When I think of commune immediately, I think of the Amish.
We have internet. We always have internet.
Yeah.
That's true. There's ways.
Yeah.
Cool.
Do we want to make like Saturday morning CyberSec like a weekly thing?
Yeah, you want to do this next week? I think I'm free.
I think I'm free next week. I don't know if weekly is something I'll be able to do every time, but Saturday is a good day for this, I think.
Yeah,
So let's chat with
a lot of people are here.
Yeah.
I had like 2,000. So
wow, that's a lot of people. Geez. I've only been on TikTok. I've just been, there's no audio. So I think I had like 6 people. Hopefully I had more on TikTok. I mean on Twitch, but I think now because I streamed on TikTok for at least 25 minutes, I should be able to actually get audio working for TikTok next time as well. But yeah, no, I'm absolutely down. I think
I'm also doing Thursdays if people want to join that.
Yeah, I might be down for a Thursday thing. Yeah, no, that seems like a doable, something doable. So, Oh, I
Cool.
never went live on Instagram. Okay, well that explains.
Oh yeah, I forgot to do that
Okay.
too.
I
Sorry,
like
everyone.
15 people. There's folks here. There's like 65
Yeah,
people.
everyone who joined on TikTok, thank you for joining. I'm sorry I didn't have audio working on there, but Twitch has it all, and I recorded on there. So hopefully next time I have it there.
Yeah,
Thank you
I
so
like
much for meeting, guys.
Yeah, of course.
I guess I'll end the stream. Thank you so much.
see y'all soon.
Absolutely. Chat with y'all later and keep in touch.
Cool. All right. Bye.
See ya.
Bye.